Well, hey there, guys. Welcome to a new crusade. Today, we're going to be talking about my reading plan for the year. So, basically, the plan with this YouTube channel is to do mainly interviews with people and then also to do, for the content I want to put out specifically, I'm looking mainly at political philosophy, specifically, obviously, Catholic political philosophy. There we go. Now I can see the chat. I can see it in the chat. That's awesome. I thought it wasn't supported. There we go. Okay. So yeah, today we're going to be talking about the book reading list. So the idea with the channel is to put out mainly political philosophy content and then interviews. So for me specifically, that tends to be my main interest. There's nothing else like theology or anything like that I'm really educated enough to be talking about. And so I do know a little bit about political philosophy, and then I'm also doing some reading right now, which is what I'll be showing you guys in order to properly educate myself so that I can kind of put out some interesting content, something that's actually worth you spending time and watching. And so because of that, we'll go through those books real quick and just kind of as a starter, kind of maybe you get to know me a little bit better, and then just as a way to get some content out there as well. So the first book that I've started, that I'm already reading, and that I'm finishing up reading right now is this. This is Revolution and Counter-Revolution, which was written by Plinio Correa de Oliveira. So this gentleman specifically was a founder of an organization, which I'm a big fan of, called the TFP. Here in America, they're called the American Society for the Defense of Tradition, Family, and Property. They were founded in Brazil, though, as you can tell by his very Brazilian name, Plinio Correa de Oliveira. That they were founded at the beginning or middle of last century in the 1900s. And their founder, Dr. Plinio, he was a pretty prominent Brazilian statesman. He served in their government in multiple different positions, and he very famously founded this specific group. The TFP is a Catholic organization, and it basically focuses around the ideas put in this book and the action that he prescribes to fix the problems that he diagnoses in the book. Well, he calls it the revolution. And so the book is called Revolution and Counter-Revolution. So he's describing this issue called the revolution, which he sees as kind of a unifying, totalitarian, holistic revolution against the good. And specifically what he's using to define that term within the book is broader Christian and specifically Catholic society, so like Christendom and Christian Europe. And so he then prescribes what he deems to be counter-revolutionary action, in contrast to what is very prominent today, which would mainly be like conservatism and conservative action. He kind of describes why that's a problem and why that doesn't work. And he goes in specifically to how, instead of trying to conserve what we have, why we need to actually go forth and do counter-revolutionary action instead and fight against the revolution. The general kind of idea would be that essentially a lot of conservatives, you'll often hear them say, well, I want to go back to the 1950s, or the slightly smarter ones, you'll hear them say, well, I want to go back to the 1600s or the 1400s or whatever it is. But the issue is that if these main problems that are being addressed by the book are not addressed, and we just end up in the same place we are in the same amount of time back. And so I've been liking that book so far. This has been a interesting, something interesting for me to listen to, or something interesting for me to read. I've heard that talked about a lot through talking with my friends who also enjoy this book, and it's been pretty interesting. No Goon Manual coming up unless someone writes it and gives it to me. Then perhaps there will be a Goon Manual review. But so that's the first book. This has been really interesting talking to people, especially on Twitter or on X. We've been talking, been labeled like reactionary, and I think that's not a great term. And I like the term counter-revolutionary better. And this specific book is kind of the basis for that set of ideas. And so that's really informed a lot of my thought and kind of how I think we ought to go forward, or how we ought to act moving forward. The next book, which I plan to prioritize, is going to be The Republic by Plato. The level of philosophical reading that I've done is very, very minimal. And so because of that, I figured that since I'm interested in political philosophy and then I guess regular philosophy, this was probably a good place to start. It had also been recommended to me by some other people with a lot more education than I have. I can't speak too much on Plato, honestly. Like I said, I haven't read this one yet, so I'm planning on working on this. I also have, thanks to my fiance, a copy of the completed works of Plato coming in, which I think is supposed to be a part of a pretty good translation. And so because of that should be in shortly. And separately, we're going to have two books, which are kind of going to build as well onto that. The ideas of Plato were very instrumental and influential on this specific individual. And that's going to be St. Augustine. So here we have City of God by St. Augustine, kind of the beefier political / theological treatise. And then here we separately have Confessions, which is his life story. This was recommended to me to read in general. One of my friends who has both a theology and a philosophy degree recommended this as a good starting point to get into Christian and specifically Catholic kind of moral teaching and political philosophy. So I plan to read the Confessions first, just because of the shorter length, and my understanding is it's a bit more approachable. And then hopefully I can work my way into City of God, and I plan to really kind of trudge through this. I haven't heard a lot of negative things about either one of these. I don't think that they're especially difficult to read, but I could be wrong. And then for fun, kind of dispersed throughout, I have a friend, the same one who recommended Confessions, was talking to me recently about Charles Coulomb, who is a monarchist, and he was recommending one of Charles Coulomb's books, or just recommending his books in general. And so he had one of his most recent ones, which he loaned to me, which I also plan to read. And that's going to be Blessed Charles of Austria. Man, this glare is terrible. But maybe the jacket looks good, or maybe without the jacket, it looks good. It doesn't. Blessed Charles of Austria. And so this is about one of the Habsburg rulers, I believe. And that should just be some lighter, more historical reading. And that should be pretty interesting to kind of get through as well. And I plan to use that to break up the more theological or philosophical reading. Confessions is excellent. Basically saved my faith when I needed it. That's awesome. That's from one of my friends who has had an interesting and complicated, I guess, faith journey. And he's now kind of reached a good place, I think, as far as I can tell. And so that's really good to see. So those are the books that I plan on 100%. Like, that's my goal, is to finish those books this year. I don't think I'll necessarily feel bad if I don't get through all of them. I purposely picked a small amount of more intense reading versus a wider range of easier reading. Last year, that was kind of my goal, was a lot. I didn't really hold myself to any standard with the intensity of reading. So I was reading through a lot more like novels and fun stories like that. I guess I could do a separate video on some of that stuff, which might be interesting. If there's nothing too much to say from anyone else, I think I might just end it there. Like I said, this was mainly a kind of test stream as well as a test video. I was wanting to test the live streaming software. I haven't used it before. I'd only used it to record locally. And so because of that, I wanted to do a test here. And then also just to hopefully put out some interesting or some information that would be interesting to some of you guys. But I plan to have more interviews coming out soon. And as I do more reading, I plan to come out with more videos on that as well. And then I have some other stuff, my conversion story and some other stories that I think just to kind of get out there. They might not be interesting to everyone, but I think that the ideal would be the more information I'm putting out there and the more videos I'm putting out there, it kind of gives more of you guys a chance to see how interested you are. If you have anyone you think I should talk to, or anyone who wants to talk to me, feel free to let me know that as well. And besides that, I think I'll end it right there.